The fluorescent lights of Seoul General Hospital's emergency room buzzed overhead as I completed my 14th hour of shift. My white coat hung heavy on my shoulders, spotted with the evidence of the night's chaos: blood, iodine, and exhaustion. I'm Dr. Park Ryong-so, 26 years old, and despite my delicate appearance, pale skin that burns too easily, red lips that my colleagues say look painted on, features so fine my mother used to worry I'd never be taken seriously, I've earned my place in this prestigious hospital's trauma unit. Being an omega in a field dominated by alphas means proving myself twice over, every single day. Dr. Park. One of the nurses called out, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. Incoming trauma. Gunshot wounds, multiple stab injuries. 82 minutes. I straightened, pushing my fatigue aside. This is what I trained for. Prep Trauma Bay 3. I need 2 units of O-negative standing by, and get me a surgical team on standby. The automatic doors burst open and the paramedics wheeled in a gurney. The man lying there was massive, even unconscious, broad shoulders, muscular arms covered in intricate tattoos that disappeared beneath his blood-soaked shirt. His face, though pale from blood loss, was striking in its harsh beauty. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, dark hair matted with sweat and blood. Male, approximately 30 years old, the paramedic reported breathlessly. 3 gunshot wounds, shoulder, abdomen, and thigh. Multiple lacerations. Lost consciousness en route. I moved into action immediately, my hands steady despite the omega instinct that whispered danger when near such a powerful alpha, even one bleeding out on my table. His scent, even beneath the copper tang of blood, was overwhelming. Dark, intense like smoke and expensive whiskey. BP is dropping. Get me that blood now. I called out, my fingers already working to cut away his clothing, exposing the wounds. The tattoos covering his torso were elaborate: dragons, phoenixes, symbols I recognized from news reports about organized crime. My breath caught. I knew who this was. Kang Gong-yu. The name whispered in fear throughout Seoul's underworld. The most ruthless alpha in the city's gang hierarchy, known for his cruelty and his iron control over the eastern territories. And he was dying on my table. Dr. Park? My resident's voice wavered. Isn't that? I don't care who he is, I said firmly, though my heart hammered against my ribs. He's my patient. We're saving his life. Understood. The surgery lasted 6 hours. 6 hours of meticulous work, extracting bullets, repairing damaged organs, stitching together what violence had torn apart. My hands moved with practiced precision, guided by years of training and an almost obsessive need to preserve life, no matter whose. When we finally wheeled him to the ICU, the sun was rising over Seoul, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I stood by his bedside, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, the monitors beeping their reassuring rhythm. He should have died. By all accounts, with that much blood loss, that much trauma, he should have died. But he didn't. 3 days passed before Gong-yu opened his eyes. I checked on him during each shift, monitoring his recovery with the same dedication I showed all my patients. That's what I told myself anyway. I tried not to examine why I found myself lingering longer at his bedside, or why my fingers trembled slightly when I changed his dressings. It was during the night shift when it happened. I was checking his vitals, noting with satisfaction that his healing was progressing better than expected. Alpha constitution, I supposed, when his hand shot out, wrapping around my wrist with surprising strength for someone so recently near death. My breath caught as his eyes opened. They were dark, nearly black, and even clouded with pain and medication. They were intense. Calculating. Dangerous. You, he rasped, his voice rough from the breathing tube we'd only removed that morning. You saved me. I gently tried to extract my wrist from his grip, keeping my voice professionally calm. I'm Dr. Park Ryong-so. You were brought to this hospital with severe injuries. You've had surgery and you're recovering well, but you need to rest. His grip didn't loosen. Instead, his thumb traced across my pulse point, and I felt my omega biology betray me with a flutter of response. His eyes narrowed, nostrils flaring slightly as if scenting something. Omega, he stated, not questioned. That's irrelevant to your medical care, Mr. Kang. I kept my tone firm, finally pulling my wrist free. Now please, you need to rest. Your body has been through significant trauma. How long? He asked. You've been here 3 days. You were in surgery for 6 hours. You're very lucky to be alive. Something flickered across his face, surprise perhaps, as if luck was a concept foreign to him. You did the surgery. Yes, along with my team. Why? The question was simple but loaded with something I couldn't quite identify. Suspicion? Curiosity? I met his gaze steadily. Because you were dying and I'm a doctor. It's what I do. For a long moment, he simply stared at me, and I felt oddly exposed under that dark gaze, as if he could see past my professional demeanor to something deeper. What's your name again? He asked quietly. Dr. Park? Your name. Not your title. I hesitated. Ryong-so. My name is Park Ryong-so. Ryong-so, he repeated, and something about the way he said it, with that deep, rough voice, made warmth pool in my stomach. You have kind hands, Ryong-so. I felt them. Even when I was, wherever I was. I felt your hands keeping me here. I didn't know what to say to that, so I fell back on professionalism. You need to rest now. I'll check on you in a few hours. As I turned to leave, his voice stopped me. I'll remember this. What you did for me. It sounded like a promise. Or perhaps a warning. I wasn't sure which concerned me more. The next 2 weeks fell into a strange rhythm. Gong Yu proved to be a difficult patient, refusing medications, trying to leave his bed before he was healed enough, pushing his body past what was safe. But only with the other staff. With me he was oddly compliant. More than compliant. He watched me with those dark eyes every time I entered his room, tracked my movements like a predator studying prey. His men started appearing, dangerous-looking alphas in expensive suits who stood guard outside his door, who bowed respectfully when I passed. Made me nervous. It should have terrified me. But there was something else there too, something I didn't want to examine too closely. You're spoiling me, doctor, Gong Yu said one evening as I checked his healing wounds. The surgical sites were closing beautifully, his alpha healing already working overtime. Coming to see me so often. I check on all my patients regularly, Mr. Kong. I kept my tone professional, though I was acutely aware of how close I was standing to him, how his scent seemed to wrap around me despite the clinical smell of the hospital. But you spend more time with me. His hand came up, fingers ghosting along my forearm so lightly I almost thought I'd imagined it. Why is that, Ryong-so? The use of my given name still sent an inappropriate flutter through me. Your injuries were more severe. They require more attention. Liar, he said softly, but there was no malice in it. Almost fondness? You care. I see it in your eyes every time you check these wounds. You care if I'm hurting. I stepped back, putting professional distance between us. Of course I care. I care about all my patients' pain levels. It's part of providing good medical care. Is it good medical care that has you coming here on your days off? He asked, and I felt heat creep up my neck. Had he noticed? Yes, I asked. The nurses talk. They say Dr. Park comes in even when he's not scheduled, just to check on the patient in room 304. I wanted to ensure your recovery was progressing appropriately. Because you have such kind hands, he said, echoing his words from that first night. Tell me, Ryong-so, does anyone take care of you the way you take care of everyone else? The question caught me off guard. I fumbled with his chart, not meeting his eyes. That's not appropriate, Mr. Kong. Gong Yu, he corrected. Call me Gong Yu. And why isn't it appropriate? I'm simply concerned for my doctor's well-being. You look tired. You work too much. I have responsibilities. So do I. But even I know when to rest. He caught my hand, and this time I didn't pull away immediately. His thumb traced across my knuckles, gentle despite the calluses I could feel there. Who takes care of you, beautiful doctor? I can take care of myself, I said quietly. Yes, he agreed. You can. You're strong. Stronger than people probably give you credit for, looking the way you do. His eyes traveled over my face, and I felt that gaze like a physical touch. But strong people deserve softness too. I didn't know what to say. This wasn't the ruthless gang leader I'd read about in news reports. This wasn't the brutal alpha known for his violence and his iron control over Seoul's underworld. This was someone else entirely. Someone who looked at me like I was precious. Someone whose touch made me feel things I'd spent years trying not to feel. You're being discharged tomorrow, I said instead, pulling my hand back and busying myself with unnecessary adjustments to his fore. Your wounds are healing well. You'll need to follow up with your regular physician in 2 weeks, take the full course of antibiotics, and avoid strenuous activity for at least another month. No. I blinked. No. No, he repeated calmly. I'm not leaving tomorrow. Mr. Kong? Gong Yu. Your medical treatment is complete. There's no reason for you to stay. There's every reason. He sat up slightly, wincing a bit but pushing through it. If I leave this hospital, I won't see you every day. So I'm not leaving. That's You can't just stay in a hospital because you want to see someone. Watch me. There was a hint of steel in his voice now, the alpha authority I'd heard whispers about. I own half this city, beautiful doctor. I can do whatever I want. Not in my ear you can't, I shot back, surprising both of us with my boldness. I don't care who you are or what you own. You're healed enough to go home, so you're going home. End of discussion. For a moment, silence hung between us. Then, impossibly, he smiled. A real smile, not the cold smirk I'd seen him give his men. It transformed his face, made him look younger, almost vulnerable. There you are, he said softly. I was wondering when I'd see that fire. You hide it well behind all that professional courtesy. I felt my face heat. Mr. Kong? Have dinner with me. I stared. What? Dinner. Tomorrow night. After I'm discharged, as you so adamantly insist. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to something almost pleading. Please, Ryong-so. Let me thank you properly for saving my life. Just dinner. Nothing more than you're comfortable with. Every logical part of my brain screamed no. This was Kang Gong-yu, the most dangerous alpha in Seoul. Having dinner with him was beyond inappropriate, it was potentially life-threatening. But there was something in his eyes. Something genuine. Something that had been growing between us over these 2 weeks of careful conversations and lingering glances. One dinner, I heard myself say. And only because you're right, I should accept proper thanks from a patient. It's professional courtesy. The smile he gave me then could have lit up the entire city. I changed clothes 3 times before the dinner, finally settling on simple black slacks and a deep blue shirt that my roommate said brought out my eyes, whatever that meant. I'd never been on a date before, never had time, never had interest. My work consumed me, fulfilled me. Or so I'd thought. The restaurant Gong-yu chose was exclusive, the kind of place I could never afford on a doctor's salary. His driver had picked me up, a quiet alpha who'd opened doors and treated me with careful respect that felt oddly protective. Gong-yu was already there, standing when I approached the private room he'd reserved. He wore a black suit that must have been custom-tailored, and despite the fact that he'd been shot and stabbed just weeks ago, he moved with predatory grace. Ryong-so, he said, and again that warmth in my stomach at hearing my name in his deep voice. You look beautiful. I look the same as I always do, I said, but I could feel the blush creeping up my neck. Exactly. He pulled out my chair and I sat, hyper-aware of how close he stood, how his scent, cedar and smoke and something uniquely him, wrapped around me. The dinner was not what I expected. We talked. Really talked. He asked about my work, seemed genuinely interested in my research on trauma response protocols. He was intelligent, well-read, had opinions on everything from politics to poetry. You're surprised? He observed, pouring me more wine. Yes, I admitted. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? A brutal thug who can barely string 2 sentences together. There was amusement in his voice, not offense. Something like that, I confessed. The news reports are often accurate, he interrupted. I won't pretend to be something I'm not, Ryong-so. I've done terrible things. I've hurt people. I live in a world of violence and power and I'm good at it. Very good at it. I should have been afraid. Should have made excuses and left. Instead I asked, then why are you here with me? Why dinner and conversation when you could have anyone, anything you want? He was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying my face. Because in all my life no one has ever touched me the way you did. And I don't mean the surgery, though your skills saved my life. He reached across the table and I let him take my hand. I mean the way you checked on me. The way you adjusted my pillows when you thought I was sleeping. The way you explained everything you were doing so gently, like my comfort mattered to you. His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. I've had power all my life, Ryong-so. I've had fear and respect and obedience. But I've never had kindness. Not real kindness. Not like yours. Gong-yu. I didn't know what to say, my heart hammering. I want you, he said simply. I want you in ways I've never wanted anyone. And before you panic, he added with a slight smile, I know you barely know me. I know this is fast, probably crazy. But I also know what I feel, and I've never been one to deny myself what I want. I'm not something you can just take, I said, but my voice came out breathier than I intended. No, he agreed, his grip on my hand tightening slightly. You're not. You're something I have to earn. Something I want to earn. So I'm asking Ryong-so. Give me a chance. Let me show you who I can be, who I want to be for you. I should have said no. Should have walked away from this dangerous, impossible situation. Instead I said, I need time. I need to think about this. Take all the time you need, he said, though something in his eyes suggested patience wasn't his strong suit. But know this, I'm not giving up. I'm going to pursue you, beautiful doctor. Properly. With all the courtesy and respect you deserve. The way he looked at me then like I was something precious, something worth fighting for, I felt something shift inside me. Something dangerous and wonderful and terrifying. Maybe, just maybe, I wanted to be pursued. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Gong Yu was true to his word. He pursued me with single-minded determination, but also with surprising gentleness. Flowers appeared at the hospital, beautiful arrangements that made my colleagues whisper. Notes in his strong, bold handwriting. Dinner invitations I sometimes accepted, sometimes declined based on my unpredictable schedule. He learned my favorite coffee order and had it delivered during my long shifts. He never pushed, never demanded, but his presence in my life became as constant as my heartbeat. You're glowing, my colleague Dr. Min observed one afternoon, bumping my shoulder as we reviewed patient charts. This alpha who's courting you, it's serious, isn't it? I don't know what it is, I admitted. It's intense. Probably too intense. But you like it. I couldn't deny that. I did like it. Liked the way Gong Yu looked at me like I was his entire world. Liked how he remembered small details I mentioned in passing. Liked the way he made me feel safe and cherished and seen in ways I'd never experienced before. But I also couldn't ignore who he was. What he was. It came to a head one night when I was leaving the hospital late. 3 men appeared in the parking garage, not Gong Yu's men. Rivals I would learn later. They knew who I was, knew what I meant to Gong Yu. Pretty little Omega, one of them sneered, backing me against my car. Think you're special because the boss wants you? You're just leverage, sweetheart. Fear shot through me sharp and cold. I'd taken self-defense classes, but I was 1 Omega against 3 Alphas, and my suppressants meant I couldn't even use Omega biology to my advantage. I was reaching for my phone when a shadow moved, fast and lethal. Gong Yu appeared like something out of a nightmare, or a dream depending on perspective. The violence was swift, brutal, efficient. In less than a minute, all 3 men were on the ground, unconscious or worse. I couldn't tell, didn't want to know. Then Gong Yu was in front of me, his hands gentle on my face even though his knuckles were split and bleeding. Are you hurt? Did they touch you? I'm fine, I managed though I was shaking. How did you? I've had men watching you, he admitted, no shame in his voice. To keep you safe. I should have had more. I should have. He cut himself off, pressing his forehead to mine, his breath shuddering. If anything had happened to you? Gong Yu, I whispered, my hands coming up to grip his wrists. This is your world. Violence and danger and... I know, he said roughly. I know and I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry, Ryong-so. But I can keep you safe. I will keep you safe. No one will ever touch you again, I swear it. That's not the point. The point is that being with you means being a target. It means being mine, he interrupted, pulling back to look at me with those intense dark eyes. It means being protected and cherished and claimed by someone who would burn down this entire city before letting anyone harm you. That's insane, I breathed. Yes, he agreed simply. It is. Everything about what I feel for you is insane. But it's also real and it's not going away. So tell me, Ryong-so, are you brave enough to be insane with me? I looked at him, really looked at him. At this dangerous, powerful alpha who'd somehow made himself vulnerable for me. Who looked at me like I was air and water and everything necessary for life. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I'm brave enough. He kissed me then there in that parking garage with unconscious men around us. Kissed me like he was drowning and I was oxygen. His lips were soft despite their firm press, tasting of coffee and something darker. My hands fisted in his jacket, pulling him closer, and I felt his rumble of approval against my chest. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine again. Mine? He murmured. Say you're mine, Ryong-so. Yours? I agreed and felt something lock into place in my chest. Something permanent and unbreakable. This was the point of no return and I was choosing to leap anyway. Moving into Gong Yu's penthouse felt surreal. The space was enormous, all floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive furnishings, but he'd cleared an entire room for me. Your space, he'd said. Somewhere that's just yours where you can escape when you need to. That consideration, that understanding that I might need space even while living together, made me love him a little more. Well, yes, I could admit it now. Somewhere between the hospital room and the parking garage and all the quiet moments in between, I'd fallen completely in love with Kang Gongyu. "You're thinking too loud," he murmured against my neck. We were on our couch, me tucked against his side, his arm around my shoulders. Some action movie played on the enormous TV, but neither of us was really watching. "Just adjusting," I said. "This is all very different from my tiny apartment. You miss it?" He sounded genuinely concerned. "No," I admitted. "I miss the independence of it, maybe. But not the loneliness. I didn't realize how lonely I was until I wasn't anymore." His arm tightened around me. "You'll never be lonely again. I promise you that." I tilted my head up to look at him, studying his profile. Strong jaw, sharp features, but when he looked at me, everything softened. "Tell me something true," I said. "Something you've never told anyone." He was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. "I was 7 when my father first made me watch him kill someone," he finally said. "I threw up afterwards and he beat me for it. Said alphas don't show weakness. After that, he made me watch every execution, every punishment until I stopped reacting. Until I could do it myself without flinching." My heart broke for the child he'd been. "Gongyu? I'm telling you this because you should know," he continued. "I'm not a good man, Ryongso. I've done terrible things and I'll probably do more terrible things. But with you," he turned to face me fully, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. "With you I want to be better. You make me want to be the man you see when you look at me." "I see you exactly as you are," I said softly. "The good and the bad. And I'm choosing you anyway." Something fierce and possessive flashed in his eyes. "Say it again." "I'm choosing you." "No," he said, his thumb brushing over my bottom lip. "Say you love me. I see it in your eyes, feel it in the way you touch me. Say it, Ryongso." My breath caught. "I love you," I whispered. Probably too much, too fast, but I do. "I love you, Gongyu." The kiss he gave me then was different from all the others. Deeper, more claiming. His hands framed my face like I was something precious, and I melted into him, my fingers curling into his shirt. "Bedroom," he murmured against my lips. I want to touch you, all of you. But only if you're ready. Tell me you're ready, beautiful." "I'm ready," I breathed and let him lift me, carrying me down the hallway to our room. He laid me on the bed with surprising gentleness for someone so powerful, his body covering mine but not crushing, supporting his weight on his forearms. "You tell me if anything is too much," he said, his voice rough with want but his eyes serious. "This is about you, about us. I want you to feel good, Ryongso. Only good." I nodded, unable to form words as he began unbuttoning my shirt, his fingers deft despite the slight tremor I could see in them. He was affected, wanted this as much as I did, but he was holding back, letting me set the pace. "Touch me," I whispered. "Please, Gongyu. I need." "I know," he murmured, pressing kisses along my newly exposed collarbone. "I know what you need, beautiful. Let me take care of you." And he did. Oh, he did. His hands mapped every inch of my skin like he was memorizing me, his lips following the path his fingers traced. He took his time, drawing out my pleasure until I was trembling beneath him, soft sounds escaping my lips that I'd never made before. "So beautiful," he breathed, kissing down my stomach. "So perfect, Ryongso. Mine. All mine." "Yours," I agreed, my hands in his hair as he continued his exploration. When he finally touched me where I needed most, I arched off the bed, overwhelmed by sensation. "That's it," he encouraged, his voice like dark velvet. "Let me hear you, beautiful. Want to know I'm making you feel good." He was patient, attentive, learning what made me gasp and what made me moan. When I finally came apart under his ministrations, his name on my lips, he held me through it, whispering praise and promises against my skin. Later, when I'd recovered enough to think, I reached for him, wanting to return the pleasure. But he caught my hands, bringing them to his lips. "Tonight was about you," he said firmly. "About showing you how much you mean to me. We have time, Ryongso. So much time for everything else." I curled into his chest, feeling safe and cherished and completely overwhelmed by the depth of what I felt for this complicated, dangerous, beautiful man. "I love you," I whispered again. "I love you too," he replied, and I heard the truth of it in every word. "More than I knew I could love anything. You've changed everything, beautiful doctor. Everything." The next few months were an education in what it meant to be with Kang Gongyu. His world was dark and dangerous, yes, but he kept me carefully separate from the worst of it. His men treated me with respect that bordered on reverence. The boss's Omega, they called me, but there was genuine warmth in it, not just duty. I continued working at the hospital, something Gong Yu insisted on despite his obvious worry. Your work is important, he'd said when I brought it up. You save lives, Ryongso. I won't take that from you, even if every instinct I have wants to lock you away somewhere safe. I appreciate that, I'd replied, touching his face gently. But I also appreciate that you worry. Always, he'd murmured, turning to press a kiss to my palm. I'll always worry about you, beautiful. It's part of loving you. He started making changes, small at first but gradually more significant. Pulling back from the most violent aspects of his business, focusing on the legitimate enterprises he'd built. He said it was strategic, a better long-term plan. But I knew it was more than that. He was trying to be the man I saw when I looked at him. Our intimate life grew and deepened, each encounter teaching us more about each other. Gong Yu was an attentive lover, always ensuring my pleasure before his own. True to his word that first night, he let me lead, let me set the pace and explore at my own comfort level. You're holding back, I observed one night, feeling the tension in his body even as he moved slowly, carefully inside me. Want to be gentle with you, he gritted out, his control clearly fraying. I won't break, I assured him, wrapping my legs around his waist. Show me, Gong Yu. Show me everything. The sound he made was almost pained, but he did as I asked, his movements becoming more powerful, more claiming. And I loved it, loved the feeling of being possessed by him, claimed by him, loved by him with an intensity that should have scared me but instead made me feel alive. After, as we lay tangled together, both breathing hard, he traced patterns on my bare shoulder. I never knew it could be like this, he admitted quietly. Never knew intimacy could be about more than just physical release. What is it about for you now? I asked, turning to look at him. Connection, he said simply. Love. Belonging to someone and having them belong to me. You've ruined me for anyone else, Ryongso. There's only you. Only ever you now. I kissed him, soft and sweet. Good. Because there's only you for me too. The trouble came, as I suppose it always would, from someone challenging Gong Yu's position. A rival gang leader who saw my presence in Gong Yu's life as weakness, as distraction. They were wrong. The attack came at the hospital, bold, stupid, desperate. 4 armed men storming into the ER during my shift, demanding to know where Dr. Park was. I was in surgery when it happened, unreachable, unaware. By the time I emerged, scrubbed and exhausted, it was to chaos. Security, police, and my heart stopped, Gong Yu standing in the middle of it all like an avenging angel. Ryongso, he breathed when he saw me, and I'd never seen such naked relief on anyone's face. In 3 strides he had me in his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe. You're safe. You're safe. What happened? I asked, even as his scent wrapped around me, settling my frayed nerves. Someone made a mistake, he said, his voice deadly calm even as his hands trembled slightly where they gripped me. Someone thought they could use you to get to me. They were wrong. I pulled back to look at him, seeing the cold fury in his eyes. Gong Yu. No, he said firmly. No mercy. Not for this. Not when it comes to you. The police wanted statements. There were questions, concerns about why gang activity had targeted our hospital. But Gong Yu's lawyers appeared, smooth and efficient, handling everything while he refused to let me out of his sight. Finally, hours later, we were back at the penthouse. I was shaking, the adrenaline finally wearing off, and he scooped me up, carrying me to the bathroom. Bath, he said simply. Then food, then sleep. Then we talk. I let him take care of me, strip me down, settle me into hot water scented with lavender. He washed me with gentle hands, his earlier fury banked but still visible in the tightness around his eyes. I'm okay, I said softly. I wasn't even there when it happened. I'm okay, Gong Yu. But you could have been, he said roughly. If you'd been anywhere else in that hospital, if you'd finished surgery 5 minutes earlier. He cut himself off, pressing his forehead to my temple. I can't lose you, Ryongso. I can't. You're everything. Everything. Then don't shut me out, I said, turning in the tub to face him. Don't hide this part of your life from me and then wonder why I don't understand when danger comes calling. I chose this, chose you, knowing what it meant. Trust me with the truth. All of it. He was quiet for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Okay, beautiful. No more secrets. No more protection through ignorance. We face this together. Together, I agreed. And he told me everything. About the business, the territory disputes, the delicate balance of power he maintained. About the changes he was trying to make, pulling back from violence, investing in legitimate enterprises. About his plans for the future, our future. I want to build something better, he said. For us. For the family we might have someday if you want that. I want to give you a life where you don't have to be afraid, where the man you love isn't constantly looking over his shoulder. That's a beautiful dream, I said softly. But change takes time. And in the meantime, I need you to be honest with me. About the dangers, about what we're facing. Can you do that? Yes, he promised. I can do that. The next few weeks were intense. Gong-yu kept his promise. He told me everything, involved me in decisions that affected our safety, our future. It was terrifying and empowering in equal measure. His rivals had been dealt with, though he spared me the details. I appreciated that. I didn't need to know everything, just enough to understand the reality we lived in. I have a meeting today, he said one morning over breakfast, with some of the other territory leaders. It's a peace negotiation, trying to establish clear boundaries so incidents like the hospital don't happen again. That's good, I said, though worry twisted in my stomach. He caught my hand, bringing it to his lips. I'll be careful. I'll have security. And I'll come home to you, Ryong-so. Always. Promise? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Promise, he said firmly. Nothing could keep me from coming home to you. But that night, when he returned, I could see the tension in every line of his body. He was unhurt, but something had happened. Talk to me, I said, guiding him to sit on the couch. He pulled me into his lap, burying his face in my neck. They want me to choose, he said quietly. Between the business, all of it, everything I've built, or you. My heart stopped. What? Some of the older leaders think I've gone soft. Think my love for you makes me weak, makes me vulnerable. They want me to prove my loyalty to the organization by... He trailed off, his arms tightening around me. By giving me up, I finished for him. Yes. Or by bringing you fully into that world, making you part of it in ways you never wanted. Showing them you're not a weakness but an asset. And what do you want? I asked, even though part of me was terrified of the answer. He pulled back to look at me, his dark eyes fierce. I want you. That's all I've ever wanted. I told them they could have their business, their territory, all of it. Because nothing, is worth losing you. Tears pricked my eyes. Gong-yu, that's your whole life. Everything you've built, everything you are, is meaningless without you, he interrupted. Don't you understand, Ryong-so? Before you, I was existing, not living. You gave me something to fight for beyond power and territory. You gave me love. Hope. A future worth having. But if you walk away, what happens? Won't they come after you? Probably, he admitted. That's why I'm not walking away entirely. I'm transitioning, passing leadership to someone I trust while maintaining enough influence to protect us. It'll take time and it won't be easy, but it's possible. I cupped his face in my hands, overwhelmed by what he was offering. You'd really give up everything for me? In a heartbeat, he said simply. I'd give up the world for you, beautiful doctor. Gladly. I kissed him then, pouring everything I felt into it. Love, gratitude, fear, hope, all of it. He responded with equal intensity, his hands gentle despite the passion I could feel thrumming through him. Make love to me, I whispered against his lips. I need to feel you, need to know this is real. He carried me to our bedroom, laying me down like I was something precious. Our clothes disappeared slowly, each piece of fabric removed with reverence. When he finally settled between my thighs, his length pressing against my entrance, we both paused. I love you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. More than I have words for, Ryong-so. You're my everything. I love you too, I breathed, pulling him down for another kiss as he pressed slowly inside me. The stretch was familiar now, welcome, and I gasped as he filled me completely. He moved slowly, deeply, his forehead pressed to mine as we breathed the same air. It was more than physical. It was communion, connection, a promise made in the joining of our bodies. Mine, he murmured, his hips rolling in a rhythm that had me arching beneath him. Yours, I agreed, wrapping around him, holding him close. Always yours, Gong-yu. He brought me to climax with patient skill, swallowing my cries with his kiss. When he followed, spilling inside me with my name on his lips, I felt something settle deep in my chest. This was right. We were right. Whatever came next, we would face it together. 6 months later, things had changed dramatically. Gong-yu had successfully transitioned leadership of his organization to his second-in-command, a ruthless but honorable alpha named Tae-jun who understood the delicate balance needed to maintain peace. We'd moved to a new penthouse, one with tighter security but more light, more space for the life we were building. Gong-yu had invested in several legitimate businesses. Restaurants, a security firm, real estate. He was still powerful, still respected, but the day-to-day violence was behind him. "You look happy," I observed one morning watching him make breakfast. It was his new hobby, cooking for us, something he said grounded him in this new life. "I am happy," he said, setting a perfect omelet in front of me. "Happier than I knew was possible." "You did that, Ryongso. You showed me there was another way to live." "We did that," I corrected. "Both of us, together." He came around the counter, tilting my chin up for a soft kiss. "Together," he agreed. "Speaking of which, I have something for you." My heart jumped. "Gong-yu." "It's not what you think," he said with a slight smile. "Though if you're ready for that, I have a ring waiting." I laughed, shaking my head. "What is it then?" He pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the counter. Inside was a deed to a medical clinic in one of Seoul's underserved neighborhoods. "I know you love trauma work," he said, "and I'm not asking you to give that up. But I thought maybe a few days a week you might want to run your own clinic. Help people who can't afford the big hospitals. Make a difference in a different way." Tears filled my eyes as I looked from the deed to him. Gong-yu, this is incredible." "You're incredible," he said, pulling me into his arms. "You saved my life, Ryongso. Not just in that ER but every day since. You showed me what it means to be human, to be loved, to have something worth living for beyond power and fear. Let me help you save more lives. Let me be your partner in this." "You already are," I said, standing on my toes to kiss him. "In everything. Always." That night, we made love slowly, tenderly, taking our time to map each other's bodies as we'd done so many times before. But there was something different now, a sense of peace, of rightness, of a future stretching out before us bright with possibility. "I want to bond you," Gong-yu murmured against my neck as we moved together. "Want everyone to know you're mine, that I'm yours. Want that permanent connection between us." "Yes," I breathed, tilting my head to expose my bonding gland. "Yes, Gong-yu. Bond me. Make me yours completely." His teeth pressed against the sensitive spot, and I felt the sharp pleasure pain as he bit down, claiming me in the most permanent way an alpha could claim an omega. The bond snapped into place and suddenly I could feel him. His emotions, his love, his absolute devotion flooding through our new connection. It was overwhelming. It was perfect. When we both came apart moments later, it was together, connected in every way possible, body, heart, and now soul. Epilogue forever. 1 year later, I stood in the garden of our new house, a real house with a yard and space for the family we were planning, and watched Gong-yu supervise the installation of a playground. "We don't even have kids yet," I called out, amused. "Planning ahead," he called back, that smile on his face that he only ever gave me. "Doctor's orders to avoid stress, remember? Getting this done now means less to worry about later." I rolled my eyes but couldn't help smiling. The clinic was thriving, my work at the hospital continued, and Gong-yu had thrown himself into legitimate business with the same intensity he'd once applied to running an empire. We were building something beautiful. Something real. He came over, wrapping his arms around me from behind, his hand settling on my stomach. We'd only just confirmed it yesterday. I was pregnant, barely a few weeks along, but we were both already completely besotted with the idea of our child. "Happy?" he murmured against my ear. "Deliriously," I admitted, leaning back into his warmth. "You? More than I deserve," he said. "But I'm selfish enough to keep it anyway. Keep you, keep this life, keep every perfect moment." I turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd come into my ER dying and had somehow given me more life than I'd known was possible. "I love you," I said simply. "I love you too, beautiful doctor," he replied. "Now and always." And as he kissed me there in our garden, with our future literally growing inside me and stretching out before us, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made the right choice that night in the parking garage. I'd chosen to be brave. Chosen to be insane. Chosen to love this dangerous, complicated, beautiful man with everything I had. And he'd chosen me right back. Forever. The house was quiet, peaceful in the way only a home filled with love could be. Gong-yu had just finished locking up, his nightly routine of checking every door and window. Old habits from his previous life that I'd learned not to comment on. It made him feel better, made him feel like he was protecting us, and I understood that need. I was already in our bedroom, having changed into soft sleep pants and one of his shirts that hung oversized on my smaller frame. He liked seeing me in his clothes, said it satisfied some alpha instinct to have his scent on me even though we were bonded now. When he entered, his eyes found me immediately, darkening with that familiar heat that still made my stomach flutter even after all this time together. "Come here," I said softly, sitting on the edge of our bed. He approached without hesitation, trust implicit in every movement. When he stood before me, I reached up to undo the buttons of his shirt, taking my time, letting my fingers trace the warm skin I revealed inch by inch. "Ryong-so," he murmured, his voice already rough. "Shoo," I soothed. "Let me take care of you tonight. You're always so focused on my pleasure, on what I need. Tonight is about you." His breath caught and I felt the tremor that ran through him. For all his power, all his control in every other aspect of his life, he gave that control to me here. Always. I slid his shirt off his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor, then traced the scars that marked his torso, reminders of the night we met, the surgery that had brought us together. I pressed soft kisses to each one, feeling his muscles tense beneath my lips. "Lie down," I instructed gently. He did, stretching out on our bed, his dark eyes watching me with an intensity that made me feel powerful and cherished all at once. I took my time removing the rest of his clothes, revealing him completely to my gaze. "You're beautiful," I whispered, running my hands up his thighs, watching his length respond to my touch. "So beautiful, Gong-yu." "Only for you," he managed, his voice strained as I wrapped my hand around him, stroking slowly, learning anew what made him gasp and what made him moan. I leaned down, pressing kisses along his hip bones, his lower abdomen, teasing everywhere except where he most wanted my attention. His hands fisted in the sheets, his control visibly fraying, but he didn't push, didn't demand. He let me set the pace, let me explore. When I finally took him into my mouth, just the tip at first, his groan was deeply satisfying. I worked him slowly, attentively, paying attention to every sound, every tension in his body, learning what brought him the most pleasure. "Ryong-so," he gasped, his hand coming to rest gently in my hair, not directing, just touching, connecting. "I need, please." I pulled back, meeting his desperate gaze. "What do you need?" "You," he breathed. "Need to be inside you, need to feel you. Please, beautiful." I smiled, stripping off my remaining clothes before straddling his hips. We kept supplies in the bedside table, and I prepared myself slowly, watching his face as I did, seeing the way his eyes darkened further with want. "You're killing me," he groaned as I took my time. "Good things come to those who wait," I teased, but my own breathing was unsteady now, my body ready for him. When I finally positioned myself above him, guiding his length to my entrance, we both held our breath. I lowered myself slowly, so slowly, taking him inch by inch, adjusting to the fullness, the stretch, the perfect feeling of completion that came from being joined with him this way. "Oh," I breathed when he was fully seated inside me. "Yes, you." His hands came to my hips, not to control but to steady, to support. "Move when you're ready," he said, his voice tight with restraint. "Take what you need from me, Ryong-so. Everything I have is yours." I began to move, setting a gentle rhythm that had us both sighing with pleasure. His length filled me perfectly, hitting places inside that made sparks of sensation shoot through my body. I rode him slowly, savoring every moment, every connection point between us. "Touch me," I requested softly, and his hand immediately wrapped around where I needed him, stroking in time with my movements. The pleasure built gradually, like a tide rising, each wave higher than the last. Our eyes stayed locked, the bond between us humming with shared sensation, shared emotion. I could feel his pleasure through our connection and he could feel mine, creating a feedback loop of intimacy that was almost overwhelming. "I love you," I whispered, leaning down to kiss him as I continued moving. "Love you so much, Gong-yu." "Love you," he returned against my lips, his hands still working between us, bringing me closer and closer to the edge. "My beautiful Omega. My everything." The climax, when it came, washed over us both gently but completely. I felt myself tighten around him as pleasure rolled through me in waves, and his answering release filled me with warmth as he groaned my name like a prayer. I collapsed onto his chest, both of us breathing hard, hearts racing in synchrony. His arms came around me immediately, holding me close as we both came down from the high. "That was..." he started, then seemed at a loss for words. "Perfect," I finished for him, pressing a kiss over his heart. It was perfect. We lay like that for a long time, still connected, his length softening inside me but neither of us ready to separate yet. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my back, and I drew invisible designs on his chest, both of us content in the peaceful aftermath. "Thank you," he murmured eventually, "for taking the lead tonight, for showing me that kind of tenderness." "You give me tenderness every day," I replied, "in 1,000 different ways. I just wanted to return it, show you that you deserve to be cared for too." "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You loved me," I said simply. You chose me, protected me, built a life with me. That's everything, Gong Yu. He shifted us carefully, rolling so we lay side by side, finally separating our bodies but immediately pulling me back against his chest, spooning around me protectively. Sleep, beautiful doctor, he murmured, pressing a kiss to my bonding mark that made me shiver pleasantly. I'll be right here when you wake up. You're always right here, I said, lacing my fingers with his where they rested on my slightly rounded belly, our child growing safe between us. That's all I need. As I drifted off to sleep, wrapped in the arms of the man I loved, I felt completely at peace. Our life together was everything I'd never known I wanted, passionate and tender, exciting and safe, filled with love in its purest form. And this gentle intimacy in the quiet of our home, was just as beautiful as every heated encounter we'd shared. Because it wasn't about intensity or passion in this moment, it was about connection, trust, and the deep, abiding love that had transformed both our lives. It was about coming home to each other in every possible way. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world.
I never thought my pain could become someone else's reality, but today when he collapsed in the middle of a war council, I understood the curse was real, and I, George, an ordinary servant Omega, was the other half of that curse. I worked in the palace kitchen wing from dawn until dusk. Nobody ever noticed me because Omegas in the palace were just background noise, invisible. That morning I was carrying a heavy silver tray when it suddenly slipped from my hands. In my desperate attempt to catch it, my wrist twisted at an awkward angle. Pain shot through my hand and traveled up my entire arm so sharp that I had to abandon the tray right there and clutch my wrist. I thought maybe a few minutes of rest would fix it, but then suddenly the palace erupted into commotion. Guards started running in every direction, servants began whispering frantically, and news spread like wildfire. Prince Caden, the sole heir to the Alpha royal bloodline and future king, had collapsed unconscious in the throne room during a war council. Advisors reported that he experienced sudden unbearable pain in his right wrist, and he fell from his chair completely incapacitated. My heart stopped when that news reached my ears. I looked down at my own wrist, which was now swelling rapidly, and an old palace legend came rushing back to my mind. Centuries ago, a curse had been placed upon the royal bloodline. The legend said that if an alpha began to physically feel their fated mate's pain, the curse would activate. Fate would bind them together, whether they wanted it or not. I quickly wrapped my wrist in cloth and applied a tight bandage so nobody would notice. I told myself this was just a coincidence, nothing more. But deep down my heart knew the truth. Prince Caden had never even noticed my existence. To him I was just another invisible servant, nothing more than background noise. But that night when guards suddenly escorted me to the head healer's private chamber, I looked through the doorway and saw Prince Caden standing there. For the first time he looked directly at me. And there was no softness in his gaze, only suspicion and frustration. He stared at me as if I were some puzzle that urgently needed solving. "You felt it," he said in a slow but firm voice, stepping closer toward me. I said nothing because my throat had gone completely dry, but my silence became his answer. "This is the curse," he finally said, his voice low and dangerous. He came so close that I could feel his scent, cedar and smoke, pure alpha dominance radiating from every pore. "If you feel pain, I feel it too. If you get injured, I collapse. Fated mate bond." "So, what happens now?" I asked, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. He looked at me with eyes that were cold yet restless, as if he couldn't quite comprehend this situation either. "Now we both have to keep this secret. If the court finds out that my fated mate is a low-ranking servant Omega, the council will eliminate you. And if my enemies discover that you're my weakness," he paused, his jaw tightening visibly, "they'll target you and use you to torture me." I looked at him and understood for the first time. My existence was no longer just my own. I had become his greatest weakness. And the worst part was that he resented me for this curse. Because now his life depended entirely on my safety. The weight of that realization crushed me. I wasn't some cherished mate he'd dreamed of finding. I was a liability he had to manage. A problem that needed constant monitoring. The way he looked at me wasn't with affection or even curiosity. It was calculation. Cold, practical calculation about how to minimize risk. "How long have you worked here?" he asked suddenly, his tone clipped and businesslike. 3 years, I replied quietly. He nodded slowly, processing this information as if filing it away for future reference. "And in those 3 years, how many injuries have you sustained?" I thought back, trying to remember. "Small cuts, maybe some burns from the kitchen. Nothing serious." "Nothing serious," he repeated, his voice taking on an edge. Do you understand what nothing serious means for me? It means I could collapse during a diplomatic meeting, during combat training, during a battle. Each scenario he listed made his voice harder, more bitter. Your carelessness becomes my vulnerability. The accusation stung, even though I knew he was right to be concerned. I never asked for this, I said, my own frustration finally breaking through. Neither did I, he shot back immediately. Then he took a breath, seeming to force himself to calm down. But here we are, bound by something neither of us wanted, neither of us chose. The head healer cleared her throat from the corner of the room, reminding us of her presence. She was an elderly woman with kind eyes that had seen too much palace intrigue. Your Highness, if I may suggest, the bond cannot be broken. Historical records show that every attempt to sever a fated mate curse has resulted in death for both parties. Caden's expression darkened even further. Then we adapt. George will be moved to my personal wing immediately. We'll create a cover story. A cover story? I echoed, confused. You'll be my private attendant, he explained curtly. It gives me a legitimate reason to keep you close, to monitor your safety. Nobody will question it. Monitor my safety? I repeated, the words tasting bitter. You mean control my every move? His eyes flashed with something, anger maybe, or frustration at my resistance. Call it what you want, but understand this, George. Your survival is now directly tied to mine. If you die, the curse might kill me too. If you're captured, I become a puppet. So yes, I will control your every move if that's what it takes to keep us both alive. The finality in his voice left no room for argument. I was no longer a free person. I had become a prisoner of circumstance, bound to an alpha who saw me as nothing more than a dangerous obligation. When do I move? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Tonight, pack whatever belongings you have. From now on, you don't leave my sight unless I explicitly permit it. He turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. Without looking back, he added, and George, try not to get yourself killed. I have a kingdom to run, and I can't afford to collapse every time you stub your toe. The door closed behind him with a decisive click, leaving me alone with the head healer. She approached me with sympathy in her eyes and gently examined my wrist. The prince is harsh, she said softly, but he's terrified. This curse has made him vulnerable in ways an alpha should never be. Give him time. But as I sat there, my wrist throbbing and my future suddenly uncertain, I wondered if time would make any difference at all. Prince Caden had made his position crystal clear. I wasn't his fated mate. I was his burden, and that hurt worse than any physical pain ever could. The next morning arrived with a strange, unsettling quality. I wanted desperately to return to my normal servant routine, but everything had permanently changed overnight. Prince Caden had ordered the head steward to transfer me immediately to his personal wing. My official title became Prince's private attendant, which was a perfectly logical cover story. Nobody suspected anything unusual. The other servants assumed the prince needed someone trustworthy for his personal care. But the reality was far different. He was monitoring me constantly, tracking every small movement I made. Because if something happened to me while he was in an important meeting or battle, he would suffer the consequences. During the first day, I thought perhaps he was acting this way, out of some protective instinct. But I quickly realized the truth. He was controlling, not protective. He treated me like a valuable asset that needed securing, nothing more. Don't lift anything heavy, he snapped sharply one afternoon, when I attempted to move a chair in his study. I'm fine, it's just, shut up and listen to me, he interrupted, immediately closing the distance between us. If you hurt yourself, I get hurt. And I cannot afford weakness, especially when war preparations are underway on the northern borders. Do you understand? I looked at him, my chest tightening because this felt like humiliation. So what should I do? Just sit here like a statue, like some decorative piece? He grabbed my wrist, gently but with a firm grip. Yes, if that's what it takes. The following days felt suffocating. I remained in his chambers while meals were brought to me, unable to perform any actual work. But then one evening when he returned from a council meeting, I noticed blood on his shoulder, a small injury, probably from a training session or perhaps a confrontation with someone. The strange thing was that I felt nothing, no pain whatsoever. You didn't feel anything? He asked, observing me carefully as if trying to confirm I was telling the truth. I shook my head. No, nothing at all. He gave a dry smirk, but clear frustration showed in his eyes. So the curse is one way. Only your pain transfers to me, but mine doesn't affect you. In that moment, I realized just how twisted and unfair this bond truly was. He was protecting me solely to protect himself. I wasn't some cherished, fated mate from the stories. I was simply a liability, a burden that required management. Yet then one night, when I accidentally cut my hand on a kitchen blade because I needed to do something, anything, he came to me immediately. He grabbed my hand, saw the blood, and without saying a word, bandaged it himself. His touch was unexpectedly gentle, almost caring, as if he was being extra careful. "Why are you doing this?" I asked softly, genuinely confused by this sudden tenderness. He paused, his eyes briefly meeting mine before looking away. "Because if you die, I don't know exactly what will happen with the curse, and I can't take that risk when the kingdom is anticipating an enemy attack." But there was something else in his voice, something he refused to admit, perhaps concern, perhaps guilt. I couldn't quite understand it, but this was the first time I had seen any crack in his armor. Over the next week, a strange routine developed between us. He would leave for council meetings, military strategy sessions, diplomatic encounters, all the duties of a crown prince. And I would wait in his chambers, essentially imprisoned for my own safety, or rather for his safety. One afternoon, he returned earlier than expected and found me standing by the window, staring out at the palace gardens below. I hadn't heard him enter. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice lacking its usual sharp edge. I was startled but answered honestly, "Freedom. I'm thinking about freedom." He approached slowly and stood beside me at the window. For a long moment, we both looked out at the gardens in silence. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, and birds flew freely overhead. "I know this is difficult," he said finally, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Being confined like this, difficult doesn't begin to describe it," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my tone. "I went from being invisible to being watched every second, from having no importance to being the most dangerous person in the palace." "Dangerous to me," he corrected, "not to anyone else." "Exactly my point," I said, turning to face him. "Everything about this situation revolves around you. Your safety, your vulnerability, your kingdom. What about me? What about what I want?" His jaw tightened, and I could see him struggling with something internally. "What do you want, George?" The question caught me off guard because he'd never asked before. He'd simply made decisions and expected me to follow them. I considered lying, considered giving him some simple answer that wouldn't complicate things further. But instead, the truth came out. "I want to matter for myself, not just because hurting me hurts you. I want to be seen as a person, not a problem to be managed." He looked at me for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Not quite softness, but perhaps understanding. "You do matter," he said, though the words seemed to cost him something, "more than you realize." Before I could respond, a servant knocked urgently at the door. Caden's entire demeanor changed instantly, snapping back into his princely composure. "Enter." A messenger rushed in, bowing quickly. "Your Highness, there's been an incident in the East Wing. Someone tried to access the restricted archives. The intruder escaped, but we believe they were searching for information about the royal bloodline." Caden's expression hardened into something dangerous. "Increase security on all restricted areas, and double the guard rotation on this wing." His eyes flicked to me briefly before returning to the messenger. "Nobody gets close to my personal chambers without explicit authorization. Understood?" "Yes, Your Highness." The messenger bowed and left quickly. After the door closed, Caden turned back to me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Someone is actively investigating the curse, which means they suspect something about us? How is that possible?" I asked, fear creeping into my voice. "We've been careful, not careful enough apparently." He began pacing, his strategic mind clearly working through possibilities. The timing of my collapse was too public, too witnessed. Anyone with knowledge of the curse would start connecting dots. "What do we do?" He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. "We stay alert, we trust nobody. And George?" His voice dropped lower, more serious. "From this point forward, if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you tell me immediately. Your instincts might save both our lives." I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. We weren't just bound by a curse anymore. We were targets, and neither of us knew who was hunting us or why. I never imagined that inside the palace, surrounded by so much security, real danger would find me. But enemies were closer to Caden than either of us had realized. One afternoon, I was served my routine tea, exactly as it arrived every day. I was alone in Caden's private lounge, because he was attending an emergency council meeting about border disputes. I picked up the cup and took my first sip and immediately knew something was terribly wrong. The taste was bitter, strange, and my throat began burning. Poison. I spat out the tea instantly, but some amount had already gone down. Pain started, first a tight feeling in my chest, then breathing became difficult, and my hands began trembling uncontrollably. Then news arrived. Prince Caden had collapsed in the throne room in front of everyone. Same symptoms exactly: chest pain, breathing difficulty. The court erupted into chaos. Guards rushed everywhere. Healers were summoned urgently, and advisors panicked because their prince had fallen without any obvious reason, even though he had been physically fine moments before. I understood immediately that this was my fault. My poisoning was affecting him. The head healer came to me secretly and administered an antidote, flushing my stomach. Gradually my breathing normalized, and as soon as I stabilized, Caden's condition improved as well. But then an unexpected visitor entered the chamber. Prince Nico, Caden's younger brother. He had always been calculated, sharp, observant, and secretly ambitious for the throne. Interesting pattern, Nico said, studying me slowly like a detective examining evidence. My brother collapsed at the exact moment you were poisoned. Strange coincidence, don't you think? My heart stopped. If he truly knew I was Caden's fated mate, I was as good as dead, because he could easily exploit the curse for his own gain. But then Caden burst through the doorway, weak but steady. His face was pale but determination burned in his eyes. Nico, get out now. Brother, I said leave, Caden growled, using full alpha command that couldn't be ignored. Nico left slowly, but his eyes remained fixed on me. The suspicion was clear and dangerous. He either knew something or was dangerously close to guessing the truth. When we were finally alone, Caden approached me and gently held my face, checking for any remaining symptoms. Who was it? I don't know, I whispered, still shaken. But this was deliberate. Someone planned this. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself or for the throne. Fear for me. In that moment, something fundamental shifted between us. Subtle but undeniable. I will keep you safe, George, he said, his voice rough with emotion, no matter what it takes. And in that moment, I felt for the first time that maybe this wasn't just about the curse anymore. Maybe something deeper was developing between us. But the danger wasn't over. That evening, Caden called for his most trusted guards and the head healer to meet privately in his chambers. I sat in the corner, still recovering, while they discussed the situation. The poison was oleander extract mixed with nightshade, the healer explained. A combination that would be painful but not immediately fatal. Whoever did this wanted George to suffer slowly. Which means they know about the bond, Caden stated grimly. This wasn't a random attempt. Someone specifically targeted George to incapacitate me. One of the guards, a scarred veteran named Marcus, spoke up. Your Highness, if I may, the tea service goes through multiple handlers, kitchen staff, tasters, servers. Any one of them could have been bribed or threatened. Then investigate all of them, Caden ordered, quietly. I don't want whoever orchestrated this to know we're looking. What about Prince Nico? Another guard asked carefully. His timing was suspicious. Caden's expression became unreadable. My brother is ambitious, but I need proof before I can accuse a member of the royal family. Watch him closely, but don't let him know he's being monitored. After the guards left, only the healer remained. She looked at both of us with ancient knowing eyes. Your Highness, I must speak plainly. This attack will not be the last. As long as George's existence remains a secret, he will be vulnerable. And as long as he's vulnerable, so are you. What are you suggesting? Caden asked, though his tone indicated he already knew. Make the bond public, she said simply. Announce George as your fated mate. Yes, it will cause scandal and political upheaval, but it will also make him untouchable. Nobody would dare harm the acknowledged mate of the crown prince without facing immediate execution. No, Caden said immediately. That would paint an even larger target on his back. Every enemy of the crown would see him as the perfect leverage. With respect, Your Highness, he already has that target, the healer countered. The only question is whether he faces it with the full protection and authority of your position, or continues hiding in shadows where assassins can strike freely. Caden looked torn, and I could see the conflict warring across his features. Finally, he turned to me. What do you think, George? This decision affects you more than anyone. I was surprised he was asking my opinion. Throughout this entire ordeal, decisions had been made for me, not with me. I considered carefully before answering. I think hiding hasn't kept me safe, I said slowly. Someone already knows or strongly suspects the truth, and they'll keep trying until they succeed. I met his eyes directly. But I also understand the political complications. I don't want to be the reason your kingdom falls into chaos. The kingdom won't fall, Caden said with certainty. But you're right that hiding isn't working. He turned back to the healer. Give me time to think. I need to consider all angles before making this decision. The healer bowed and left, leaving us alone once again. The room felt heavy with unspoken thoughts and fears. Caden came and sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what? For everything. For treating you like a burden instead of a person. For being so focused on the political and strategic implications that I forgot you're the one actually in danger. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. You didn't choose this curse any more than I did, but you've borne the consequences with more grace than I have. His words caught me completely off guard. This was the first real apology, the first genuine acknowledgement of my perspective. I know you're trying to protect both of us, I said softly. I'm failing at it, he replied bitterly. You were poisoned right under my nose, in my own chambers, under my protection, but I survived, we both did. He looked at me then with an expression I couldn't quite read. George, I need you to understand something. If anything had happened to you today, if the poison had worked, it wouldn't have just been about the curse. I would have, he trailed off, seeming to struggle with the words. Would have what? I prompted gently, but before he could answer, alarm bells began ringing throughout the palace. We both jumped to our feet as guards burst through the door. Your Highness, the northern border has been breached. Enemy forces are advancing. The war had begun, and everything was about to become infinitely more complicated. By the following morning, war had been officially declared. Enemy forces at the northern borders had launched a massive attack, and the situation had become critical. The kingdom needed its strongest alpha warriors, and Prince Caden, as crown prince and future king, had to lead the army into battle. I watched him prepare for war, strapping on heavy armor, checking his sword's edge, his commanding presence on full display. He embodied pure alpha strength, powerful and fearless. But I knew a truth that nobody else understood. If something happened to me while he was far away on the battlefield, he would become vulnerable in front of enemies. If I fell or got injured at the wrong moment, he would collapse too, and in war even a single second of weakness meant death. He had me locked in the most secure room of his private wing, with heavy guards posted outside. Nobody will get through these doors. They've been reinforced. You just need to stay safe until I return. What about you? I asked, my voice shaking despite my efforts to control it. He stopped, then slowly turned back toward me. For the first time, his expression showed vulnerability. I'll be fine. The battlefield is where I belong. But you, please George, take care of yourself. Don't take any risks. None at all. It was the first time he had used my name properly, softly, as if he genuinely cared. I nodded, my throat tightening because words wouldn't come. He left, and I remained in that locked room, waiting as anxiety grew with each passing hour. The palace felt emptier with him gone. I could hear the distant sounds of the army marching out. Horses neighing, armor clanking, war drums beating a rhythm that echoed through the stone walls. Other servants moved through the corridors outside my door, their whispered conversations filled with worry about the coming conflict. Some had family members in the army. Others feared what would happen if the kingdom's defenses failed. I sat by the narrow window, watching the sun move across the sky. Time felt both too fast and impossibly slow. Every shadow made me jump. Every footstep in the corridor made my heart race. The guards outside changed shifts regularly, their low voices a constant reminder of the danger we all faced. As evening approached, I tried to eat the meal that had been brought to me, but food tasted like ash in my mouth. How could I eat when Caden was riding toward battle? When every sword stroke, every arrow, every moment of combat could be his last? Then night fell, and suddenly sharp pain exploded in my chest. Left side, a stabbing sensation as if a blade had pierced through. I collapsed to the floor, clutching my chest with both hands, breathing rough and uneven. This wasn't my pain, it was Caden's. He had been injured, seriously injured. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed silently. Please let him be okay. Please let him survive. The pain continued for several agonizing minutes before slowly beginning to fade. Maybe he had received treatment, maybe he had stabilized. I lay there on the cold floor, drenched in sweat and completely exhausted, grateful that the pain was lessening but terrified about what it meant. But then I heard something that made my blood run cold, the sound of my door being unlocked. I struggled to sit up, still weak from the residual pain. An unexpected visitor stepped inside. "Nico, I convinced the guards to step aside," he said smoothly, entering with an eerie calmness that sent chills down my spine. "You know, don't you, George?" He approached slowly, like a predator circling wounded prey. "I know everything, the curse, the fated mate bond, your connection to my brother." I glared at him despite my weakness. "What do you want, Nico?" "It's quite simple, actually," Nico said with a cold smile that never reached his eyes. "I want the throne, and your death will automatically cause my brother's death." Wonderfully convenient, wouldn't you say? He pulled a sharp blade from inside his jacket, walking toward me with deliberate slowness, savoring this moment, and I realized this might truly be my end, and with it Caden's end as well. My mind raced through options. I was too weak to fight him physically. The guards outside were loyal to him, or at least convinced to look the other way. Screaming would be useless. I backed against the wall, searching desperately for anything I could use as a weapon, but Caden had cleared the room of anything potentially dangerous for exactly this reason. "You know what's beautiful about this plan?" Nico continued, clearly enjoying monologuing his victory. "When they find you dead, they'll assume it was an assassin connected to the enemy forces. The kingdom will be in chaos, Caden will die mysteriously on the battlefield from the curse, and I'll be the only remaining heir. The council will have no choice but to crown me." "You've thought this through," I said, trying to buy time, trying to think of anything that might save me. "Of course I have. I've been planning this since I first suspected the curse bond between you two. That collapse during the war council was too perfectly timed with your injury. I started investigating and the pieces fell into place. He was close now, close enough that I could see the ambition burning in his eyes. Nothing personal, George. You seem like a decent person, but you're standing between me and power always wins." He raised the blade and I closed my eyes, preparing for the strike that would end everything. But instead of pain, I heard a tremendous crash as the door exploded inward, splinters of wood flying everywhere. Caden stood in the doorway, still in his blood-stained armor, clearly wounded but alive and absolutely furious. His presence filled the room with such raw power that even Nico took an involuntary step backward. "Put down the blade." Each word was delivered with such absolute authority that it seemed to shake the very air. "Brother, you should be on the battlefield. This doesn't concern." I said, "Put it down." Caden roared, and the alpha command in his voice was so overwhelming that Nico's hand trembled, the blade nearly slipping from his grip. But Nico's desperation overcame his instinct to submit. "He's making you weak. Can't you see that? This Omega has turned you into—" Caden moved with lightning speed despite his injury, crossing the room in 2 strides and disarming Nico with brutal efficiency. The blade clattered across the floor as Caden slammed his younger brother against the wall, one hand wrapped around Nico's throat. "You dare," Caden growled, his voice dropping to something primal and dangerous. "You dare threaten what is mine." Palace guards rushed in, having finally broken through whatever barrier Nico had created. They seized Nico, pulling him away from Caden's grip and forcing him to his knees. "Treason," Caden announced, his voice ringing with cold finality. "Attempted assassination of the Crown Prince's mate, conspiracy against the throne." He looked down at his brother with something that might have been disappointment or might have been contempt. "Permanent exile. You have 1 hour to leave the kingdom. If you ever return, the sentence is death." As the guards dragged Nico away, still struggling, still protesting, Caden turned to me. His armor was dented and stained with blood, his face pale from blood loss, but his eyes were focused entirely on me. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice suddenly gentle, concerned. I shook my head, unable to speak as emotion overwhelmed me. He crossed to me quickly and gathered me into his arms, mindful of his injured side but refusing to let that stop him from holding me close. "When I felt your terror," he said softly, his breath warm against my ear, "I knew something was wrong. I left the battlefield, abandoned my post, and rode back as fast as my horse could carry me." "You abandoned, but the war, none of it matters if you're dead," he interrupted firmly. "Don't you understand that yet? The kingdom, the crown, the war, all of it is meaningless if I lose you." His words struck something deep inside me, breaking through the last walls I had been keeping around my heart. This wasn't just about the curse anymore. This was real. Whatever had started as an unwanted bond had transformed into something neither of us had expected. I thought I was going to die, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. I thought he was going to kill me, and you would die too, and it would all be over. But you're alive. We're both alive. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his hands framing my face. And I swear to you, George, I will never let anyone threaten you again. The moments after Nico's arrest blurred together. Healers rushed into the room, insisting that Caden needed immediate treatment for his wounds. He refused to leave my side until they finally agreed to treat him there, in the same room where he had just saved my life. I sat nearby, still shaking from the adrenaline, watching as they removed his damaged armor and revealed the extent of his injuries. A deep gash ran along his left ribs, clearly from a sword strike that had come too close. Other smaller wounds covered his arms and shoulders, evidence of the fierce battle he had abandoned to save me. This needs stitching, Your Highness, the head healer said sternly. And you've lost significant blood. You should be resting, not riding for hours at full speed. I'm aware of my physical state, Caden replied curtly, though he winced as she began cleaning the wound. His eyes never left me. How long until I can return to the front lines? Return. The healer looked at him in disbelief. Your Highness, you need at least 3 days of rest before— I don't have 3 days. My army is fighting without their commander. Your second in command is leading them, another advisor interjected, having arrived during the commotion. General Marcus sent word, he's holding the northern front, but he needs reinforcements. Caden's jaw tightened with frustration. The conflict between duty and desire played out clearly across his features. He wanted to return to the battlefield, to lead his soldiers, but he also refused to leave me vulnerable again. I can't leave George unprotected, he finally said, the admission seeming to cost him something. Not after what just happened. Your Highness, I spoke up, my voice steadier than I felt. You have to go back. The kingdom needs you. Your soldiers need you. And what about what you need? He countered immediately. My brother just tried to murder you. Someone poisoned you days ago. How many more attempts will there be if I'm not here? Then increase the guard, I suggested. Station soldiers you trust absolutely outside this door. But you cannot abandon the war because of me. If the kingdom falls, what difference does my safety make? The healer finished stitching his wound and began wrapping it in clean bandages. The room had fallen silent, everyone waiting to hear what the prince would decide. He's right, Your Highness, the advisor said carefully. Your presence on the battlefield could turn the tide, and with Prince Nico exiled, the immediate threat to George has been eliminated. Has it? Caden challenged. Nico didn't act alone. Someone gave him access to those guards. Someone told him exactly where George would be and when. There's a conspiracy within these walls, and until we root it out, nowhere is truly safe. That realization sent a chill through everyone present. If Nico had accomplices still in the palace, then the danger was far from over. Then we investigate, the advisor proposed. Interrogate the guards who were stationed outside this room. Trace every conversation Nico had in the past weeks. Find his co-conspirators. Caden considered this, his strategic mind clearly working through possibilities. Marcus, he called to one of the guards who had helped arrest Nico. I'm placing you in charge of George's security. Select 5 men you trust with your life. They will guard this room in shifts, 2 at a time. Nobody enters without my explicit permission. Nobody, regardless of rank or title. Yes, Your Highness, Marcus replied, snapping to attention. And George, Caden turned back to me, his expression softening slightly. You don't leave this room for any reason until I return. I know you're tired of being confined, but after tonight I need to know you're safe behind reinforced doors with guards I personally trust. I wanted to argue, to protest being locked away again. But the truth was, I had been terrified when Nico had that blade raised, ready to strike. Safety suddenly seemed more important than freedom. I'll stay, I agreed quietly, but promise me you'll be careful on the battlefield. If you die out there, I die too, remember? He smiled faintly at that, though the expression held more sadness than humor. How could I forget? Every moment I'm in combat, I'm aware that a blade meant for me could kill you as well through this cursed bond. The healer packed up her supplies and left with the advisor, leaving us with just Marcus and one other guard in the room. Far enough away to give us some privacy, but close enough to respond to any threat. Caden reached out and took my hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on my palm. When I felt your fear earlier, it was overwhelming, more intense than any pain we've shared through the curse. I was in the middle of a strategy meeting with my generals, and suddenly I couldn't breathe, couldn't think about anything except getting back to you. I'm sorry, I said automatically. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. Your fear saved both our lives. If I hadn't felt it, if I had stayed at the front. He trailed off, not needing to finish the sentence. We both knew what would have happened. I've been treating this bond like a burden, like a weakness to be managed. But tonight, it saved you. I thought about that. How the very thing he resented had been the reason he arrived in time. The curse that trapped us together had also kept us alive. When do you leave? I asked, dreading the answer. Dawn. I'll rest here tonight, then ride out with the sunrise. He saw my expression and added quickly, Marcus will bring you reports twice daily. You'll know how the battle is going and you'll know that I'm alive. The reports won't tell me if you're in pain. If you're injured but hiding it from everyone, then feel through the bond. He suggested. You said earlier that you don't feel my pain the way I feel yours. But you felt my injury tonight, that stabbing sensation in your chest. Maybe the bond is becoming stronger, more reciprocal. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because it meant I would know if he was truly in danger. Terrifying because feeling his pain meant experiencing every wound, every blow he took in battle. Try to avoid getting hurt, I said, attempting lightness and failing. I'll do my best. But George, there's something else we need to discuss. His expression became serious, more intense. When this war ends, when we've secured the borders and dealt with the remaining conspirators, I'm going to make a public announcement about us. My heart skipped in. You're going to tell the court about the curse? I'm going to tell them you're my fated mate. That the bond is real, undeniable, and permanent. He squeezed my hand. No more hiding. No more pretending you're just my attendant. You'll have a title, protection, and recognition as my chosen partner. The court will never accept it. A servant Omega as the future king's consort, they'll riot. Let them try. Any noble who objects will answer to me directly. There was steel in his voice, absolute certainty. I've spent weeks treating this bond like a political problem to be solved. But you're not a problem, George. He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. The vulnerability in his expression was striking, this powerful alpha prince, reduced to uncertainty by emotion. I'm what? I prompted softly. You're mine, he said simply. Not because of the curse, not because fate decided it, but because somewhere between the resentment and the fear, and the constant proximity, I started to care about you. Really care. And tonight when I thought I might lose you, I realized just how much. My breath caught. This was as close to a confession as he had ever come. Not quite love, maybe too soon for that word, but definitely more than duty or obligation. I care about you too, I admitted, the words feeling momentous. Even when you were controlling and frustrating and treating me like a burden, I understood why. And now, he encouraged. Now I can't imagine not being bound to you. He leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine just as he had done once before. But this time, the gesture felt different, more intentional, more meaningful. A promise of something growing between us. We stayed like that until exhaustion finally pulled him into sleep. I watched over him, this fierce alpha who had abandoned a war to save me, and wondered what the future would hold for us both. The next month transformed everything. The war at the northern borders ended with decisive victory. Enemy forces had been pushed back and treaties were being negotiated. Nico had been permanently exiled, stripped of all royal titles and forbidden from ever returning to the kingdom. Slowly but surely, stability began returning to the palace. But now everything had fundamentally changed. Caden had made a decision, one that would shock the entire kingdom. He called for a grand court session. Every advisor, every noble family, every high-ranking official had been summoned to attend. I stood to the side of the throne room, nervous and uncertain about what was coming, though Caden had warned me the night before. Tomorrow, I'm telling them everything, he had said. Are you ready for your life to change completely? I hadn't been sure how to answer. Ready or not, it was happening. Now watching the throne room fill with curious nobles whispering among themselves, I felt my anxiety spike. These people held power, influence, and deeply traditional views about bloodlines and social hierarchy. What would they think about a servant Omega being claimed as the crown prince's mate? Caden stood before his throne, not sitting in it. A deliberate choice that made him seem more commanding, more present. He wore formal royal attire, the crown prince's circlet on his head, every inch the future king. When he raised his hand for silence, the room immediately quieted. I have summoned you all here today to make an important announcement regarding the future of this kingdom, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast space. As you know, our family's bloodline carries an ancient curse, one that binds an alpha to their fated mate through shared pain. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The curse was known, but rarely discussed openly in court. It was the kind of thing nobles gossiped about but never acknowledged in official settings. That curse has activated, Caden continued, and I have found my fated mate. The murmurs grew louder. Nobles craned their necks, looking around the room as if expecting some high-born Omega to step forward. When Caden gestured toward me, the room fell into shocked silence. George, who has served in this palace for 3 years, is my fated mate. The curse has bound us together through pain, through danger, and through circumstances neither of us chose initially. But now I choose him freely, consciously, and permanently. The silence shattered into chaos. Gasps, shocked exclamations, and immediate protests erupted from multiple corners of the room. Your Highness, this is a servant? How can one elderly advisor sputtered, his face turning red. Preposterous, another noble declared. The crown prince cannot bond with someone of such low status. It's unprecedented. I am not asking for permission. Caden's voice cut through the noise like a blade, commanding and absolute. I am informing you of a fact. George will remain by my side as my partner, as my future consort when I take the throne. Anyone who takes issue with this decision can address their concerns directly to me. The threat underlying his words was crystal clear. Challenge this and you challenge the crown prince himself. Lord Ashford, one of the most influential nobles, stepped forward carefully. Your Highness, please understand our concerns. This is not about the young man personally, but the traditions, the bloodlines, the expectations of nobility. Surely you see how this disrupts everything. I see perfectly well, Caden replied coldly. I see nobles more concerned with tradition than with truth, more interested in bloodlines than in bonds. But let me be absolutely clear. I will not hide George. I will not pretend this bond doesn't exist. And I will not apologize for choosing him. A younger noble, Lady Iris, spoke up hesitantly. But Your Highness, if the curse is real, doesn't that mean the kingdom itself is at risk? If this Omega is harmed, you could be incapacitated during crucial moments, which is precisely why George will receive full royal protection, Caden stated firmly. Any threat to him is a threat to the crown. Any attempt to harm him will be treated as high treason. I trust that message is clear to everyone present. I stood there, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. Caden was staking his entire reputation, his political capital, his relationship with the nobility, all for me. Part of me wanted to stop him, to tell him it wasn't worth it. But another part, a deeper part, felt something warm and precious growing in my chest. The court session continued for another hour, with various nobles raising objections, questions, and concerns. Caden addressed each one with patience when warranted and steel when necessary. Some nobles eventually accepted the situation, recognizing they had no real choice. Others remained clearly opposed but knew better than to openly defy their future king. When the session finally ended and the throne room emptied, I found myself alone with Caden in his private chambers. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on both of us. You didn't have to do that, I said softly. You could have kept me hidden, kept this secret. No, I couldn't. He approached me, taking both my hands in his. Hiding you, treating you like a shameful secret, that's not who I want to be. And it's not what you deserve. Half the court thinks you've made a terrible mistake. Half the court can reconsider their opinions or find themselves with reduced influence, he replied with a slight smile. I'm not completely reckless, George. I have allies who support this decision, who understand that fated mate bonds are sacred, regardless of social status, and the younger nobles especially are more open to change. I looked up at him, this alpha prince who had transformed from resentful captor to willing protector to something even deeper. Why are you really doing this? Is it just the curse? He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. When this started, yes, it was about the curse, about managing a dangerous situation. But somewhere along the way, between the assassination attempts and the war and the constant fear of losing you, something shifted. Shifted how? I stopped seeing you as my weakness and started seeing you as my strength. He lifted one hand to cup my face gently. You faced poisoning, threats, confinement, and near death with more courage than most trained warriors I know. You've never complained, never blamed me for the situation, even though I gave you plenty of reasons to resent me. I did resent you at first. I admitted honestly. When you were controlling and cold, I deserved it. But you saw past my worst behavior to understand why I acted that way. And you never stopped being kind, even when I didn't deserve kindness. His thumb traced along my cheekbone. That's when I knew this was more than just a curse binding us. My heart was racing now, sensing where this conversation was heading. What is it then? Love, he said simply, the word falling between us like something precious and fragile. I love you, George, not because fate decided it, but because I choose it. Every day I choose you. Tears pricked at my eyes because this was everything I had wanted to hear but had been too afraid to hope for. I love you too, I whispered, even though you're stubborn and overprotective and impossible sometimes. He laughed, and the sound was genuine and warm. I can work on that. Well, maybe not the overprotective part. You're still going to have guards following you everywhere. I can live with that. He leaned down slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted. But I didn't want to. Our lips met in a kiss that was gentle at first, tentative, as if we were both still learning this new dynamic between us. Then it deepened, becoming something more certain, more real. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Caden rested his forehead against mine in the gesture that had become ours. The curse brought us together, I said softly. But this, what we have now, this is our choice, he agreed, and I wouldn't change it for anything. Outside, the moon had risen over the palace, casting silver light through the windows. Inside, we stood together, no longer bound only by curse but by something far stronger. Genuine love, freely given and gratefully received. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever opposition we would face from traditionalist nobles, whatever dangers still lurked in the shadows, we would face them together. Not as prince and servant, not as alpha and omega bound by unwanted fate, but as partners who had chosen each other against all odds. The curse that had once seemed like a prison had become the bridge to our future. And that future, uncertain as it might be, looked brighter than anything I had ever dared to imagine.